Welcome to SARC Talk. SARC is a nonprofit cancer research organization that develops and manages clinical research trials in pediatric and adult sarcomas. SARC Talk is a podcast to discuss activities of SARC, interview sarcoma research leaders, and review scientific initiatives in the sarcoma field.
Welcome to SARC Talk, episode 16. My name is Scott Okuno, medical oncologist at Mayo Clinic and chief medical officer of SARC. All episodes are posted on our website, Spotify and YouTube channel, or wherever podcasts are available. Please submit comments because we do read them and make adjustments as we see fit. As you know, please share this SARC Talk with those that are interested in sarcoma. Please leave comments so we can then make sure that we connect the dots later on. And today, our guests are two hosts of a very popular podcast, and it's called Sarcoma Sisters. This is Dr. Lisa Kopp, as well as Dr. Wendy Allen-Rhoades. Dr. Kopp is a pediatric hematologist, oncologist, and medical director at Day One Biopharmaceuticals, and an adjunct associate professor at the University of Arizona, Tucson. Dr. Wendy Allen-Rhoades is assistant professor of pediatrics and a pediatric oncologist at Mayo Clinic, Rochester. If you have the opportunity, please check them out at podcast at sarcomasisters.com. That's where I first got to know them. Plus, Dr. Allen-Rhoades, her and I both go to sarcoma conferences and tumor boards together in Rochester, so we do see each other there. So please welcome Dr. Kopp as well as Dr. Wendy Allen-Rhoades to SARC Talk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Okuno. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. And unfortunately, we're all virtual, as we would say. So for many of us that have been in sarcoma some time, most of us are adult sarcoma oncologists. And it's kind of neat to hear some information about what the Sarcoma Sisters are about, because you do span both the pediatric realm as well as the AYA realm. And maybe you can each share a little bit about yourselves and what you do in your professional life. Maybe we'll start with Dr. Kopp.
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Okuno. So as in my professional life, I work in industry. I'm a medical director at, as you mentioned, at Day One Biopharmaceuticals, and I oversee phase 1, phase 2 clinical trials and their development across the board. And then I also, I currently see patients about once a month at Phoenix Children's Hospital as well. And that's about what I do.
Oh, well, thank you very, very much. We'll maybe get into a little bit more about your director role, but we'll get into Dr. Wendy Allen-Rhoades, War. What do you do?
See, Dr. Okuno is just used to calling me Wendy or War, which is totally fine.
Yeah, I know. I have to kind of stop and say, what is this? How am I supposed to say it?
No, it's nice to see everyone. And thanks for having us. We've been trying to get this scheduled for a while. But as you know, Dr. Okuno, I am now at Mayo Clinic as one of the pediatric oncologists here doing solid tumor and including sarcoma. And I previously was in Texas where I only did sarcomas. So that's my professional life. In a former life, I also worked in an osteosarcoma lab and ran my own little lab within a lab doing bench research on a genetically engineered mouse model of osteosarcoma, which I don't know if I ever shared that with you before.
No, you haven't.
But then when I came to Mayo Clinic, I switched over to all clinical research and am focusing on rhabdomyosarcoma and then taking care of all the kids and teenagers here and working on our adolescent young adult oncology program at Mayo Clinic.
No, we appreciate that. And, part of what I'm interested in is you did share a little bit on your YouTube stuff, but how did you two get together, first of all, and decide that you wanted to start a podcast, YouTube channel? And I can imagine why you call yourself Sarcoma Sisters, but maybe you can share with our audience how this all came about.
SARC is a part of this, Dr. Okuno.
Uh-oh.
So I met Lisa, and Lisa can tell you how we started the podcast, but we actually met at a CTOS meeting. And so we had mutual friends, right, Lisa?
Yeah, Laura Nichols.
And I went to Lisbon on my own, and I was looking for somebody to go to the conference with, and I met Pooja Hingorani and Lisa Kopp at the CTOS meeting where the annual SARC meeting is at. And so then we became friends because we hung out in Lisbon together listening to sarcoma talks. And then Lisa called me one day. This is actually all her idea. I am just a chatty person, so I think that's how that happened. But Lisa, tell Dr. Akuno how you came up with this idea.
Sure. Yeah. So part of it does have to do with me being in industry. So I had worked my whole life in clinical medicine, even as a kid. When I was 19, I worked at the Children's Hospital in Detroit as a nurse's aide. And then basically as I grew in my career, I made the decision that I wanted to just focus more on clinical research and from the industry side. So I made that transition. And then I thought it would be easy because at the time I was feeling very burnt out from clinical care, as I'm sure that many people listening to this relate to. And I thought, I'm so ready for taking on this new chapter. And then about 6 months in, I was feeling really lost. And mainly because I felt like I had lost my community and my connection because I wasn't doing the same thing. I wasn't focusing on just this small subgroup. And then I thought, my husband, he has his own medical practice and he's always an entrepreneur mindset. So I was at this conference with him and people were talking about entrepreneurial things and about podcasts. And I was like, you know what, I think I'd really like to do a podcast, but I am a huge extrovert and don't like to do anything alone. I always like to do things in groups. And I was like, who could I do a podcast with about sarcoma that would be like not only brilliant, but super fun? And of course, I thought of Wendy. And so I called up Wendy and I was like, hey, you want to do a podcast with me? Because I thought, we could I knew I would then feel more connected to the community. I would be serving the community because the idea was to have a podcast that would be for patients and their families and just make it all about sarcoma and for patients and families and use it with one of my most funnest sarcoma friends.
Well, you can tell one of the funnest sarcoma friends, you both on your podcast have a lot of fun. The conversation between you two is entertaining. But as you know, a lot of what is shared is the love of, making sure patients and their family understand sarcoma. And that comes out clear and in a very fun way. So how did you guys decide as you started to build your Sarcoma Sisters, what content you wanted to start to produce? And then the second thing would be is, as you started to produce this content, how did you get feedback to say hey, we need this, let's go get this speaker? So how did this operationally take a hold and how did that evolve?
We started with our friends. So who did we start with, Lisa? Was it Abba Gupta?
She was definitely in the beginning. Oh, we started with one of my patients' families.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we wanted to introduce the podcast with a family perspective and go from there. And then we started kind of picking through our friends. And then I started picking, we would brainstorm. And like you said, we've taken a little bit of a break in the 2023 year, just for various professional and personal reasons. But we started picking through topics that, some of them were the things that we kept noticing that we were re-explaining to families, or that we had found a good way to explain it, or who we would reach out to if we had questions. And then some were just because we thought they were fun people and it would be kind of interesting, and just topics that people tell us are important to them. Our patients tell us are important to them. I think that's the main way that we started picking through them. And then we started getting suggestions from colleagues about things that they wanted to talk about, or they wanted to sort of socialize in the community. I think that's how it all started, right, Lisa?
Yeah, I can't say that it was a really regimented way of doing it, but yes, that is what we did. And I think, when we first started, we talked about, and then as the podcast progressed, we would talk about, what are things that we think are important. And because we both really have a love for the AYAs, I think that's why we did fertility as one of the first ones too. And we were trying to really deep dive on that. And then just like Wendy said, and then as we went on, we were trying to do some topics too that were more supportive, not directly related to sarcoma, but related to all care, like nutrition and physical therapy, that most families are patients who have sarcoma interact with, because those are also interesting to learn about and to hear their perspectives on as well. And then we started to delve into specific sarcoma subtypes. We kind of tried to get the whole range of everything.
Yeah, well, that's only 100 different types, so you got some work to go yet.
Yeah, we still have a lot more to go.
That's,
More than 100
yeah, a lot more
now,
to go.
right? They just keep finding
Yeah,
new
Yes.
genetic stuff, so we got to keep learning.
that's
Yeah.
correct. And that keeps us on our toes. But what you bring up there is quite unique, is that, and we have a very active patient family um, committees that we belong with SARC as well. We're part of the Sarcoma Coalition. And what you do bring is the not only histology specific desmoid, leiomyosarcoma, osteogenic sarcoma perspective. You say, hey, as you said, fertility, which spans everything, nutrition spans everything. So I do think that that does help lean credence. And you have some real nice speakers there that are talking in a very practical and knowledgeable level. As you two are preparing for a SARC, now it's a SARC talk, as a Sarcoma Sister talk, you make your guests very comfortable. And I think you guys know that, and you bring a lot of energy to that. What additional stuff do you do in preparation? So this is trying to get knowledge from, sarcoma podcasters to get people engaged so they can do show up. Yeah, it's easy if it's your friends, but you have some people that are good people, and they are probably your friends too, but they do it and they have fun with it. So what is your theme or programmatic way that you've been soliciting these individuals and make them feel comfortable?
Lisa does a lot of the soliciting, I'll say. She's good at following up. She's more organized than I am. I think what you're seeing, Scott, is that we're both pediatric oncologists. And so this is just part of our personality and part of the challenge of engaging people that may not want to engage or would otherwise not engage, because that's just part of what we have to do in pediatric oncology. Like, people will like dumb things. Like, first of all, you're always welcome to come over to the peds clinic anytime you want, Scott. Just come on
Yeah,
over.
yeah.
But like, your listeners can't see it right now, but I'm wearing hot pink. That is a very un-Mayo thing to do. We knew one pager would go off. Sorry. And so it's just part of like learning how to, like, our patients span from 0 at birth, babies are born with sarcoma, up to 25, and all the saucy teenagers in between that really have better things to do than be sitting in a clinic with me and Lisa. And so I think part of our personality is sort of learning how to engage with people and meet them where they are. And I think that comes through, and it's just something that evolves as you learn how to go through pediatric oncology, because you have to know all of the developmental ages and really be flexible and around where people are. So in my pediatric clinic, my sarcoma clinic, like, I'm crawling on the ground, we're playing with toys, and we're talking about tattoos and everything in between. And so I think that has really parlayed into a lot of I guess people skills. It's just learning how to deal with really tough things in a really variable age population, which I don't know. I do go over to the adult sarcoma clinic sometimes, but I think it's a little bit more narrow focus. But especially in that AYA range, like, that's where you're going to see the need to have a very flexible personality. I think that's what you're seeing. I don't know. That's just my guess. I don't know. What do you think, Lisa?
I do agree that the people who are drawn to pediatric oncology are typically more have more excitement and and fun. Not that you're not fun, Scott, but I'll have to say too that you're correct. Not everybody is our friend, but they are by the end of the podcast for sure. But what I think another thing that is helpful, and this is because I also like to listen to a lot of podcasts, and the ones that I like the best, one of my favorite people is Brene Brown. And I noticed that in her leadership podcast, she always asks people to tell us your story. So I did actually in the later, more recent podcast, I tried to also just have people tell us, what about their training, or about, about how did you actually get started in pediatric oncology or surgery or adult oncology, what led you here? And I think that's always super interesting. I mean, I learned so much like about Katie Janeway that I didn't know with the first 5 minutes that she told us about herself. It was really fun. And so I think that really lets somebody warm up and tell, lets you get to know them a little bit, and then even to build off of that, and you can really see like, oh, okay, this is what led them to this path. So it's really interesting too.
Yeah. Well, I never even thought about that. And what I'm hearing from both of you is that all pediatric oncologists have a very affable, happy demeanor, and that all the adult oncologists are sour and dour people. That's what I'm leaving here with right now. So,
No,
Always
you
always
no, don't
yeah,
ruin
yeah,
our pepper.
yeah.
I think we are allowed in pediatric oncology and encouraged to share ourselves with our patients. And I think that is a little bit different because of pediatrics, because there's just so much that happens in our clinics that it is just one way for rapport building that can't be replaced with anything else. And I think, I think there's variable degrees to which people do that or feel comfortable doing that. Lisa and I have very similar personalities. So I mean, that's why we do the podcast together. So I just think that that's part of it. That's the fun part. And that is the reason that people always ask us, why do you do pediatric oncology? It has to be so sad. And the answer is no, it can be, but it's not always. And this is the reason, because our patients are fun.
No, we do appreciate that. And, getting those patients who might not want to be there for various reasons, to get them engaged and to be committed to the treatment plans that are there is a skill. And I think if you're an adult oncologist, listen to the podcast, you have to kind of think like the pediatric teams to make sure they're engaged, because we start seeing patients 18 and older. And yeah, we're very fortunate to have this overlap with the AYA group. So it is important for us to hear. We've had several pediatric um, oncologists, AYA oncologists, interviewed on our podcast. And they're all fun, like you said. So now I'm starting to think, yeah, in fact, everybody we interview is a fun group. Part of it is disseminating information, which might not be that fun, but sharing themselves, Lisa, I think that's what you find out. And I think people remember that more than maybe the information about X, Y, and Z. So that's very, very helpful. What I wanted to explore a little bit too is that, Amy, you're at an academic center. Lisa, you're running a bio pharmaceutical group, and this is a different marriage, as we would say. This is a unique thing, and maybe you can share kind of what you do in your day to day, not in the Tucson clinic, children's clinic, but how did you get involved with the day one biopharmaceuticals, and how does that play into your ability to reach patients and families in the pediatric AYA area?
Sure. And I'll just clarify that I don't run it, because I don't want anyone getting offended who actually does run the company. I do lead clinical trials, but it's a little different. So one of the reasons I was interested in industry and going into it more was I had completed my master's of public health at the University of Arizona. And, I thought, my people, or my public health group, is patients with cancer. And I was thinking, how can I help on a higher level, which of course would be getting a drug approved, which is not very easy at all. But working in industry toward that. So I have worked at several different organizations and companies, and where I'm at now at Day One is unique because they are tackling getting drugs approved for pediatric and adult oncology, where most companies, their focus is on adults. And then now, thank goodness, to regulations from the FDA, you do have to have a pediatric plan as well for your drugs if it's relevant. So in my day to day, I do still interact very much so with oncologists, but it's not sarcoma oncologists. Unfortunately, I don't have a sarcoma clinical trial that I'm working on right now. But then now I can vouch that medical oncologists can be fun too, Wendy, because many of them that I work with turns out are fun. But it's interesting because I do work one step removed for sure, because I'm not seeing those patients in clinic, but then the patients that are enrolled in the clinical trials, we need to know what's happening and when they have adverse events. And there's a lot of details with communicating with the primary investigators from these trials. So I definitely have a lot of interaction, but it's more one step removed. But for sure, I'm thinking about patients and drug development all the time. It's just, I guess, in a different capacity than when you're actually seeing a patient in clinic. And my thinking has changed from, there's a nuance to trying to develop a drug versus just seeing your own patient in clinic. So it's interesting now when I go to Phoenix Children's to see patients and I staff the fellows clinic there. It's very interesting to me, like watching how my perspective is different than what it used to be, just when thinking about drugs and drug development and how to move these drugs forward versus, trying to just get, which you have to do so many times in pediatrics, just try to get a drug for a patient to see if it could somewhat be helpful, but then knowing that isn't going to be recorded anywhere. So it's not going to help push the drug further to get it approved for kids.
No. Now that's a unique field because Wendy and I are, as you said, in a different lane, as we would say. And maybe, Wendy, you can share your efforts to get the accreditation part, because you had to go through that last year, and then how you are building out a program so we can balance with what Lisa's doing here is getting clinical trials and getting drugs approved versus now running trials and developing a different program. Wendy?
Yeah. So there's a couple of reasons that I came to Mayo. So I was sort of coming to the conclusion in my lab that maybe I wasn't going to find the silver bullet for osteosarcoma. Because I never wanted to leave clinical care. And so I felt to do the research that I needed to do to justify it to the people at the institution, because that's a whole nother academic ball of wax. I just didn't ever see myself fully stepping away from clinical care to focus on straight wet bench research. And so I was trying to build something to be impactful for my patients. And I thought, had this, kind of mid-career crisis of like, where is my skill set and where does it lie? This kind of goes back to our original conversation, is like, I enjoy building infrastructure and programs and building things that help the patient experience and the healthcare delivery, even if I can't figure out the next big drug because Lisa's already doing it. And so I was trying very hard at my previous institution to build an adolescent and young adult program, but it was a standalone children's hospital, which is great for children, but not as good for young adults and teenagers because they don't fit in. And that's the whole problem with AYA. And so I came to Mayo because I'm from around this area. And I really saw an opportunity to kind of piggyback on the infrastructure of Mayo Clinic and build a really good adolescent young adult program to help people belong, so that they know that, the lady in the hot pink blazer probably represents pediatrics and teenagers. Like, this is very purposeful dress. And just really building out ways that we can improve it in a more collaborative way, because I just knew I wasn't going to do it in the lab myself. And so now over here in pediatrics, I'm running our clinical trials and working with our cooperative groups. And Lisa, I don't know if she told you this, she runs a cooperative working group through the NCTN, which is our AWA cooperative working group, where we have people from the adult side and the ped side kind of all working together to bring. Now we have Lisa from industry, we have our clinicians, we have our pediatricians, our medical oncologists, and just making it all so that, like, there's people working on the drugs, there's people delivering the drugs, there's people setting up the infrastructure, so we all kind of understand what each other is doing. And I think that's where we're going to make progress in sarcomas, is by running the cooperative group trials, engaging with pharmaceutical industry, engaging with the clinicians at academic centers and in the community. Gotten a really big appreciation for community oncologists since coming here. That was not really a part of my life until I moved here, just understanding where people are coming from. And so, yeah, it's been a really nice transition. It's been very hard in some ways, but very nice in others, to learn how to leverage what we have here, still work in academic medicine and run these trials. And then, the next phase of our life here in pediatrics and AWA is starting to bring some of these trials, like the day one pharmaceutical trials or what have you, into these investigator initiated trials within academics. And then Dr. Akuno, how do we decentralize our trials to get the drugs to the people where they're at? That's the big question in oncology.
Yes, I love that. And, we have a lot, part of us at SARC is trying to get people to the major sarcoma centers. And what I'm hearing from you all in the pediatric realm is we want to get treatments out to patients where they're at with sarcoma expertise or specialty expertise. And I think, we're very fortunate that the PEDS group has coalesced around a small knit group of pediatric hematologists, oncologists, AYA oncologists that really have a focus and passion for this. And, you look at the adult world, we just have very limited clinical trials. In the PEDS realm, you have very targeted trials that you're going to do, but there's still a lot of them have to come to the academic centers. But if with the help that everybody's working on is we got to get them where they are, because travel is, as you know, is hard. And with this virtual menu that we have right now, we can reach a lot more people.
Yeah, I think, I think this argument's been back and forth at every kind of sarcoma conference I've been at, is like, do we as a community want to say people need to come to the big referral centers, or are there points in their therapy where that's helpful around surgery, radiation, etc.? But then we have to realize that the biology is the biology, and we can intervene upon that in certain ways. But the course of the therapy, we have to pay attention to what people are experiencing through that. If the course of the therapy takes somebody, like, I'll use my own family, for example. I grew up in the middle of nowhere, North Dakota. My father would rather amputate an arm than come to a city like Minneapolis. He would not go someplace like that to receive care. He would rather not do that because that doesn't align with his values of like what he thinks is good quality of life. And so how do we bring our expertise and our knowledge with like touch points of where we can't get to them in those, and how do we set up the system to actually meet the needs of the patient? And that's a big question. But especially here where we are, Scott, in rural sort of Midwest, and even in cities and stuff, it's not easy to get from one side of LA to another. That is not easy. It's easier to drive to another state here than to get from west side to east side of LA. Like that's a drive. And if you have such a serious illness and you're not feeling well, like, is that time well spent? Those are big questions that I think SARC has to really wrestle with. And I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh yeah, now put it back on me because you guys are the
This is
interviewer and host
podcast
now.
101. Go back.
Yeah. Well, you bring up an excellent point, and part of our strategy at SARC is to leverage and work with the patient advocacy groups, which have deep connections with a lot of expert people in their organizations and their tumors. We also have to have places where people feel very comfortable that centers have expertise in sarcoma because it's such a rare disease, and that you were somewhere in the course of your disease should connect with, a major sarcoma center. We're in the process of rebranding or relooking at how we look at sarcoma centers on our SARC website. And it's a place of comfort. So when patients do reach out to, let's say, Mayo Clinic as a SARC site, They know there's expertise, but do they have to travel to Mayo Clinic?
Right.
And when in their disease should they come to a referral site? Or how does the local team interact with the sarcoma centers? And I think that's where I think virtual abilities, the ability to share pathology digitally, to share images, and to connect with patients where they are in North Dakota or wherever, because you're right, they're not going to come 30 miles to Rochester because they don't like the parking because they think Rochester is too big.
Yeah, 100%. And it's hard too because, in pediatrics, and if you look at like the history of pediatric oncology, we had two main research groups. They coalesced into the one. We had the pediatric oncology group and the children's cancer group, right? CCG and POG. And then they came into the COG. And that's the only way we've really made progress is we all came together because all of our diseases are rare. They're all like, we're just like, an extra 25 sarcoma subtypes because we're all rare. Leukemia is rare, brain tumors are rare. But we don't have the extra noise of the tens of thousands of patients of breast cancer that people are dealing with in the community or prostate. And so we've been able to successfully do that. And it's a question for the sarcoma community is like, how do we replicate the parts of that have worked to be collaborative in our trials, but knowing that the community oncologists are dealing with all of the rest of it too. It's a very hard question.
Yes, and you bring up the point is that and part of part of us in sarcoma is, and there's groups that we're working with as well, is how do you find those key collaborative people who can get out of the breast, lung, GI, and GU and just kind of say, hey, I can help you out with the sarcoma piece in the community, and that's a tough nut to crack, and that is a request to say is if I'm once I'm done with the academic center and I want to go and get ongoing care and have a collaborative work, is it every community oncologist or is it a core group of community oncologists? And then how do you vet those individuals? You see, many of them have trained at academic centers and have and willing to run trials and or help manage patients with sarcomas. But you're right, it's hard to get through the noise, as you say.
And I don't mean to downplay any of the carcinomas, but this is a
Yeah,
sarcoma
exactly.
podcast. But yeah, I wonder, it's
Exactly.
like you almost need not AOA champions, you need sarcoma champions at your NCORE sites and things like that.
Correct. But as you don't want to develop expertise in sarcoma in an NCOR when you only see one a month, but you're right. So I'm hearing you got the balance between the practicalities of developing a program. You got Lisa out there in Arizona, developing drugs and getting drugs to market for patients. I did hear that there are no sarcoma trials, Lisa.
Yeah, what's
Is
going
that
on,
what you
Lisa?
said?
Right. Oh,
What's going
oh
on?
yeah. I know. Well, and this is the thing, you are limited by where you work and what drugs you have available. So you definitely want to give drugs to where they're gonna um, be most well used. What's the genomic alteration? What are we targeting? But yeah, but that's definitely on my radar. Um, and I mean, yes, my goal, of course, would be to just be doing sarcoma clinical trials, but that's what we all have goals.
But we'll continue to work on that. And I think people listening to this podcast will start to understand we would love to have more drugs for sarcoma. But as Wendy said, the 70 soft tissue sarcomas in the peds world is now 75 because they break them down even more. And then now we have drugs that are specific for those five extra ones, and there's only so much bandwidth. And part of that you guys do great in the pediatric realm is collaborative work. You talked about the merging of the two cooperative groups into COG now. In the adult world, we have four cooperative groups. We have SARC, and then we have a lot of separate niche groups out there, but we all know each other. We're all part of the same group. And that's the same thing. We in a community like sarcoma kind of know each other. And I think there's continued opportunity. And this is where SARC is trying to bring everybody together. As we think about where we are in podcasting. There are other groups that are doing podcasting in tumor groups as well. We will continue with our SARC podcast and bring in people, make them comfortable, maybe have some fun, just like you guys have. What is your plans for Sarcoma Sisters in 2024 and beyond? You both are smiling because you know what we're asking.
Yeah, we had if anybody ever listens to our podcast, which we don't know. I mean, I guess people do, but I do get some feedback sometimes. Patients will tell me sometimes they found it. We had a little break in 2023, got a little busy at work doing some stuff. And so we purposefully took a break because I think we'd rather do things well than to just do them. And because we have other day jobs, we took a break. But hopefully we'll get back into it. I don't know that we have like a grand plan or a grand like there's no Gantt chart or outline for us, but just getting back to, we have topics that we haven't touched on yet and people we need to follow up with. I won't say her name, but we have somebody who's been promising to come on for many a months with us, so we might start with her. If she's listening, you might know who she is. Don't want to cut
Well,
her
you
out.
know, yeah.
um,
Well, part of what we're here and is to share that, there are strategic group that we like to partner with and to share. So if you do have speakers that might speak to the adult sarcoma realm, and we go not just to the adult ones, we go into the AYA realm, we're more than willing to share and collaborate and say, hey, we're going to promote this speaker and not have them go to both unless there's something very reasonable why we would have it. Megan, our producer here, we have the Gantt chart built out for almost all of 2024, but we're here to kind of be responsive to what people need and want. So as I started the podcast, please share comments of people you might want to have interested. And I know on your website you do have a say, you have a suggestion, please submit a name. And I don't know if people actually know that, and that might be something we'll beg and borrow and steal and say that's the same thing we're going to do with us. Is if you have a key person or a topic, then we can then do a podcast around that. So we're looking forward to more podcasts, more fun and more collaboration with the Sarcoma Sisters in 2024. We look forward to any other new guest speakers that you have coming. So that'll be fun to hear what that is about. Um, but for our audience, any final comments that you might have about podcasting and or how Sarcoma Sisters and SARC can continue to move forward?
Well, I would definitely say that, maybe now that we've been podcasting with you today, that will kickstart us into getting geared up for 2024, or asking if there's anybody who wants to work part-time on our Gantt chart.
yeah, we need a Megan. We need a producer.
Yeah, Megan, you available? Yep. But yes, thank you so much for having us. This was so great. I don't think I have anything additional to say about podcasting. Although it has been really fun for me to learn all these skills that I never knew how to do before, which was putting a podcast together and a website. And you probably all who have listened can tell that I'm doing it on my own with the with the editing that's done. And the simple website. But it was really fun to learn how to do all those things, that's for sure. And I'm hoping that we can do some more in 2024, because this has just been a real blast being on with you today.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything to add. I think it's a fun way. It's a fun format for learning. I think I think podcasts are going to be around forever. I don't think they're like the cassette tape of the internet or anything, but I think they'll be around for a while. I think they're accessible. You can start and stop them. They don't take a lot of effort. And I think that our patients, and for us, it's the parents of our patients who are really just seeking more and more and more knowledge. The consumer aspect of like consuming the information and finding the information, I think that's changed a lot in medicine. I think podcasts can help that. And I also think, like, again, kind of going back to our first conversation, medicine and sort of I don't know, the gestalt of medicine is changing a little bit, and people more and more want to understand their care teams as people too. And I think that helps them get through things that are really hard, like a sarcoma diagnosis. Like, people like to know that Lisa has a dog. They like to know that we're friends, family, spouses, because at the end of the day, we're all just people. And I think podcasts help humanize us a little bit more, behind all of the white coats and suits and scrub masks and all the things, especially post-COVID.
Yeah. No, you're right. And as I'm sitting here reflecting on the comments that both of you shared, is podcasting, there's a humanistic quality.
Yeah.
It's not just sharing information. You can get that just by anything. It's getting to know people, to know that Wendy likes pink and that's what she likes to wear for her patients, per se. Get on the floor to understand that Lisa is working harder every day, because now she knows that we're going to keep her to task, and that there needs to be a collaborative sarcoma program built out a little bit more. And you bring up the point, it's for the patients.
100%.
And that knowledge, and that is key. And we in SARC world here, SARC podcast, is trying to figure out, where is our audience? Who is our audience? And that's part of why we're blending some science, which is hardcore information, versus the more humanistic, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is why we're having fun doing it, and we're all here working together part. So we do appreciate both Wendy and Lisa here for being with us today on SARC podcast. Please look to their website. We'll link the show notes so you'll be able to see where they are, and hopefully they'll get a new episode out this year, because now we've forced them.
That's right.
And almost committed them to make another one for this year. So
yeah, well, just watch out then. You might be on the hook,
I know.
Dr. Acuna.
Yeah, no, we're okay.
We'll flip it on you.
That's right.
So we appreciate that. And thank you both for taking your time today and sharing. And I hope our audience got to know a little bit about yourselves and kind of what you guys are all about. So we do appreciate it. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So with that, we close our podcast. And if you have any questions or comments about this podcast, please let us know. We'll be posting our monthly podcast. And if any other questions come up, please let us know. So thank you all.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode of SARC Talk. To find out more about SARC, please visit our website at sarctrials.org. To suggest a topic or for questions, please email us at sarctalk@sarctrials.org. The SARC Talk series is made possible due to funding from Boehringer Ingelheim. Together, we can find a cure for all forms of sarcoma.